Hey there, everyone. I'm AJ.
And I'm Carlos.
Welcome to the Roaming Minds podcast, your space for unpacking all things related to mental, cognitive, and neural health.
We're here to shift through the mass of information related to mental health and wellness. Think of us as your friendly guides, here to assist you in making actionable choices in your mental wellness journey.
Now, please understand, we are not doctors, psychologists, or therapists. We are just humans who are curious and have a passion for all things related to mental health, sharing what we've learned for informative purposes only.
Exactly. This isn't medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you're dealing with something serious, please hit up your doctor or mental health professional. Don't take our word for it.
Never skip out on expert help or put it off because of something we discussed here. If you need support right now, check the links in the description.
So buckle up, friends. Let's dive into today's convo and explore what's on our mind.
When it comes to mental health, and you and I have talked about this multiple times before, mental health is really those biological processes.
Yes.
Neurons firing the way that they need to, the right amount of neuromodulators, chemicals firing throughout the brain. And it goes far beyond the brain, right? It's not just, well, is my brain operating healthily? I don't like that. That was bad. That was such a bad word. In a healthy manner, right?
Not healthily.
Yeah, right. That was weird, and I apologize. But in a healthy manner, right? So what does that mean? Does it mean I just focus on the brain? Well, no, obviously not, because there is an entire system that we exist inside of that requires healthy functioning in order for mental health processes, right? So what is my gut health like? What is my oral health like? Right?
Hormones, like what are my hormones doing? Like are my hormones like properly functioning? Because like a lot of hormone glands are not located in the brain, they're located in other part of the body, your lymph nodes and all this other stuff. Are these things working properly or within a healthy manner that is also in conjunction with proper health brain as well?
Right. Big time, right? All of these processes. I mean, I even think about like sinus cavities and things like that. I'd be lying if I told you that I knew what system that all ties in with. I know it's not oral health, I don't think.
No, it's not oral. It's not
Like,
oral.
right. You know what I mean? Like, I know it's close. They're closely related and all, but I don't know. Whatever. That is irrelevant to what we're really.
It's relevant, but it's more of like a health system or more of an infectious system than anything. Because like just like typical sinus infection are caused by like bodily infection or bacterial growth in the sinus cavity. So
Right.
further than no.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because I don't think we spend a lot of time thinking about those, regardless of like how important they are in terms of proximity to brain and mouth and whatever side topic that we really don't need to go down. Focusing on this idea of mental health, right? Doing the best that we can. Yes. As long as all of those systems are healthy, the chances of me being mentally healthy increase quite a bit, actually. I know, I mean, dude, I was sick all last week, and I'm not telling you I was like, my God, my life is over. That's not where I was. I know that was a little bit dramatic and probably a little bit insensitive to people who are currently struggling with any sort of mental health issues. And I didn't mean it that way in any way, shape, or form. I'm just throwing out my dramatic, I don't know what the fuck you want to call it, stupidity. The processes were not all there and running smoothly. My gut health was so last weekend, and mentally I wasn't like, yeah, man, I feel great. Life is wonderful. It was like, my God, my life is over.
Yeah.
At least a little bit. Not over, maybe not that far yet, just because it was only a few days. But if that sustains long term, inevitably, I'm not going to be doing so hot.
No, yeah. Like being sick does this weird thing to the brain where because you just feel so miserable that you, in a weird way, you start odd energy within your body starts affecting. So then you're just like, I don't want to live anymore. Because I too was sick a few weeks ago. Was I maybe a tad over dramatic about how I was feeling? Yes, but I was in also an immense amount of pain. So that pain combined to like just not feeling how I usually feel on a day-to-day life, well, just did take a little bit of a mental toll because I was just in a more of a negative space. So therefore, anything just irked me even more than it needed to.
That's why I think sickness is a good example. I don't think it's limited directly to bacterial infection, immediate sickness. There are long-term sicknesses, right, that can cause all of that. I think it is really important to kind of distinguish that mental health, because we've been using the term mental health for a really, really long time in America to describe, well, we talk about mental illness or we talk about mental health, right?
Yeah.
It's really one of the two. And the way that we treat mental health is through psychological practices, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy, psychotherapy, which is all well and dandy, but those can't really. And I want to preface this because I know I'm going to piss a lot of people off. I don't think that encompasses anything to do with mental health. It can, and it can address those topics, but it is really related more to mental wellness, right? This idea of my mind, right? And how that is functioning. And I think that that is a super important distinguishing characteristic that needs to be addressed. There we go. Man, I'm telling you, the words are just flowing off today. Fudge!
You're in here. Sometimes there's a disconnect once in what the mouth wants to say. So you're like, I know the word. And sometimes I just go, I'm not going to say that
Right.
word. I know what the word is, but I just can't get it out.
Well, last night I did like a 2-hour low intensity workout, and don't get me wrong, it was the greatest thing for me, but I'm a little wonky just in terms of thought processes and everything else. Clearly not everything is firing perfectly the way that it needs to be. There's a little bit of inflammation somewhere. I'm just not sure. I swear to God, my life. So again, coming back to reality and where we need to be, distinguishing between those two is really, really important, right? And so we've seen this drastic rise in mental health disorders in America, right? I probably should know more about statistics in other countries. I know a bare minimum in Portugal, and I don't want to say, well, we're the highest or we're the lowest, or I don't want to make any claims without really having that information before me. But I know that there's a considerable issue with mental health in America. A stupid amount of, it's going to piss me off, so I'm going to look it up. So just a couple of mental health statistics in America, right? 22% of Americans suffer from any mental illness. 52% of those then don't receive treatment.
Wow.
And young adults make up the majority of them with 33%. 49.5% of adolescents suffer from any mental illness, which is a shit ton of people.
This does pose a question. As I was thinking about it the other day, this does pose a question, because I forget what I was listening to, and it said that in America, we have realized being mentally unhealthy. I don't want to say a fad, but it's like a cool thing.
Norm at this point in time. Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. I kind of get you.
And I was listening to this guy, and he said life is supposed to be hard. All the challenges with life, it's not supposed to be easy. So are we encompassing having daily challenges or daily social problems and confronting that with some kind of mental disorder? Where does that lead us? Because a lot of people, when you say, the older generation, they didn't have our advisors or used to talk down on people. Oh, we didn't have all these illnesses. Well, true. And is it because we've over-diagnosing people, or is it, do you know what I'm trying to say? Because
no. I understand exactly what you're trying to say. And I think the answer isn't super straightforward. I think it's a yes and a no. I think that there are definitely cases and instances where people definitely use it as a form of attention. Yeah. It's a guarantee, because we see that consistently throughout any sort of state. There are always going to be people who use things like identity and different means of identification that don't actually identify in those ways. We saw this. I saw this a lot growing up in gay communities, and this isn't an attack on anybody, but I definitely had friends that were like, "Oh, I'm gay," and they weren't actually, but they were doing it in some sort of weird sense to get this negative attention. Because I'm gonna tell you, it was not the hip thing to be gay when I was growing up. There was none of that shit. And so again, what I do think that does highlight is more mental illness and mental unwellness. You have to be pretty sick in order to want to go about and obtain attention in it. that's not a healthy means of communication. It's not a healthy means of whatever. So to your point, is some of it most likely attributable to that? Sure, certainly. When we think about, well, our previous generations never had to deal with this stuff. Well, that's because they had no concept of it. As human beings, we are not going to think about things that we have no concept of, or things that don't come into our conscious awareness. A lot like what we were talking about before, about how much information our brains process and then how much actually enters into our conscious field. Back then, especially, they didn't even have the conscious awareness of it in most cases, because these were emerging theories from people like Freud and Jung and major players in fields of psychology, but who were also very, very wrong.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not. See, everything I say, I know can be taken, and somebody's gonna be like, "You're fucking crazy." Yeah, I am 100%. Go read Freud, okay? There are some things that he says that are fucking brilliant, and you're like, "Wow!" To get this from absolutely nothing from that time period, brilliant. And then there are some things that you're like, "What the fuck were you?"
Your community that, hey, Freud came up with some crazy wrong things. And the other 30% time, we're like, you know what? You may have been onto something. It's the saying, a broken clock is right twice a day. He may have been wrong all these other times, but hey, look, at least twice a day, he came up with something brilliant that is actually true and that can be further studied.
And that, I think, is really important and to understand and just get out of the way. So that being said, back to your original question of, is it just because of it? Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
Those people had no concept of mental health and the shit that we were putting into our bodies beginning in America. A part of it is shitty corporate human beings. A part of it is we were trying to figure things out, trying to figure out how to feed billions of people sustainably.
It's hard.
Is not an easy task. And so, yeah, we're gonna experiment a little bit, especially with the rise of new information. Kind of have to take into account where we are in humanity. We are at a time where information is freely available and is shared at rates that never were possible even 100 years ago. The rates of information exchange weren't possible. What did we have in the 1920s? The television was just not even beginning. I mean, you had moving pictures, but it's not like TVs were all across America. That was I want to say 40s, 50s, somewhere around
like
there.
50.
Yeah, I'm terrible with dates. I know the trajectory. Do you know what I mean? And so even without moving pictures, the internet doesn't come about for another 50, 60 years. And I'm talking about for research purposes, not for mass purposes, because for mass purposes, it really doesn't hit until the 90s. It was late 90s, early 2000s when we got internet in our house, somewhere around there. Yeah. And so it wasn't until the internet came about that we get this mass spread of information. But before that, nobody had access to information. We didn't know about mental health because nobody talked about it. Nobody was sitting there sharing these bits of information. And this goes across any topic. It doesn't matter what it is, any, newer topic, right? So how does that all play into mental health and mental wellness? Well, a lot of things. Number one, just to come back to that whole feed example, there was a whole lot of experiments with different types of additives to food, subtractives to food, because not only do you have to figure out how to grow more, but also to keep it preserved across countries, across multiple days, multiple weeks of traveling. Of course, there's going to be experiments with food that is going to change our internals biologically, all that good stuff, which is then going to lead, I think what we found to deteriorating mental health states. And I feel like I'm the perfect example of it. Growing up, I did not eat healthy. I think I drank probably 3 or 4 Coca-Colas a day, at least, maybe some more Mountain Dews. And I'm going to tell you, my mental health was fucking disgusting. But it wasn't just that diet, lack of exercise, all of these things. It was the combination of all of it that really just made those deep, dark seated places that my mind went to incredibly ugly, which then in turn forced that mental wellness to deteriorate even further, because the shit that I thought about was not normal. Not, I don't want to say normal. Normal's relative, but not healthy. I mean, it is. Like if I talk to somebody like in a third world country that's ravaged by war, their normal is my dad got his head blown away last week, and that happened to 6 of my classmates or friends, not even class, right? Because there is no school. Whatever.
Like side note, I have a coworker, like, and we were complaining about work, and like, and he was like, he comes from the Sudan, which was war tourist, and he's like, what, like. I'm here, like nobody's shooting at me, and I'm not running from trying not to die. I can't complain about like a shitty work environment. You guys are like, unfortunately do it. Like, and I was like, oh shit, we do have like a privilege of being like, that sucks. And he's like, you know what? I'm living. I'll be fine.
It's all relative in terms of things like that. But again, that also speaks back to that whole idea of not being able to conceive of what we don't have a conception of in the short term. We really do rely on those short-term processes to build our conscious experience daily. And not that we don't have concepts of long-term. We have long-term memory, but what happens with long-term memory, we have to make space for new things. And short of you being some sort of savant with a long-term memory, you're not going to remember everything. That's okay. These aren't problems. So I think these two concepts are really going to be important, A, for how we kind of move forward from here, but B, also coming episodes, all of these things, because they're important to keep in mind. We're going to probably discuss things related to mental health, but we will also discuss things related to mental wellness. And so we really have to keep those in mind when we are engaging in this sort of format. I think the bulk focus for us will really be those concepts of mental wellness and how we kind of because just because somebody ultimately gets healthy, right, doesn't mean then that my mind has to be healthy. It's not like, oh, I went and I made some changes to my diet and now I'm mentally totally fine again. But what that does mean is it at least gives me the opportunity to then go about and build those healthier mindset or a more well mindset. Because, okay, so 14 years old, I've taken a couple shots to the head by this point in time from baseballs. I definitely had concussion at some point in time. A lack of oxygen going to prefrontal cortex, 100%. And like sitting in classrooms thinking about the most effective way to eliminate the people in public places, not healthy places. Just because I then go about 7, 8, 9 years later and find ways to start being more mentally healthy. I'm moving more. I'm not drinking fucking 10 sodas a day or whatever. My diet doesn't consist of Cinnamon Toast Crunch and ramen anymore. You know what I mean? Like these were real life. I mean, this was reality for me for quite a while. Also, you threw in narcotics in there for a little bit, on and off. That was my real life mental health and mental wellness state. So we can tell just how mentally ill I really was. It is incredibly important to understand that just because you get those healthier states, that is when the work begins for the mental wellness and to actually be able to work towards becoming a well-rounded, healthy human being.
Yes.
Dude, I had a lot of dark thoughts and a lot of broken thought processes. And so only through getting healthy, changing diets, changing habits, I mean, again, changing everything about my life, could I then begin to go about fixing those broken thought processes that led to all of the destruction of my entity in the first place. And so I think our primary focus is going to be fixing those broken thought processes.
Yeah.
But it will always come back to relating with mental health. Because again, I mean, we mentioned it at the beginning of this conversation. We talked about, or I made, let me rephrase that. I made the claim that psychotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy don't help with mental health. My exact claim. I don't think so. I would go back and verify. But they can, again, because we can identify those things through psychotherapy, through cognitive behavioral. We can identify those broken patterns that keep us mentally ill and make changes. But the work really begins when it comes to dealing with the mind and fixing those broken thought patterns and becoming mentally well again.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell anybody that it's easy.
Because it's not.
No. And there is no shortcut yet.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to get too deep into that, but I just want to make sure that there's that understanding that this is a process. It is a journey, adventure, whatever word you want to stick in there for adventure. Any analogy that fits is totally fine. It is one of the most important things that I think we can do in our lifetime.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask this question because I don't remember if we did. And if we do, I think we can use our last little bit of time to kind of come back to it before we wrap up, even though I think I did a really good job at wrapping up just now.
Good.
And now I'm going to be pissed because we're going to move on. But that's okay. That's our first 20-minute wrap up. Yeah. And then
we switch it up, yeah.
we just keep it right on rolling, you know what I mean? I think we did. We kind of came back to this whole idea of like mental health in America and how that kind of relates, right? Because I think it's super easy to be unhealthy in America. I think it's easy to be healthy, but it's also super easy to be unhealthy. You know, there's a McDonald's on every street corner. You have, maybe not so much in DC, but like I remember being in Los Angeles, you had a head shop on every corner where easy access. And I'm not saying just because you smoke weed that you are mentally unhealthy. Yeah. That's not what I'm getting at. But having such a easy access to things like alcohol, things like drug. I mean,
unhealthy. Okay, it only becomes unhealthy if it's overused and used in a negative way. Because a glass of wine here and there is not unhealthy. Do you know what?
I get what you're trying to say, and it's taken me a while to kind of formulate this because I've thought a lot about it recently because you have a lot of mainstream media right now. It's like I got sober and my whole life changed and it's now wonderful. And I did this and this is great. I'm not.
More power to you.
I'm not. Right. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I don't give a shit what people choose to do. And this also kind of ties with that idea of mental wellness, not necessarily mental health. There are going to be things that we do that are unhealthy for us. We can't maintain perfect mental health at all points in time. People are trying and maybe they're succeeding. I don't follow those because I don't think it's the right way to be. I think that as with anything, and we've kind of alluded to it a little bit at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about not being aware of what we don't have any conscious experience of. Same thing, I think, goes with bodies and things like that. And I believe that a state of optimum health can defend against the unhealthy. Well, how can it defend against the unhealthy? It has to have some foreign antigens that understand it to be unhealthy. Because let's call it what it is. Alcohol is not healthy. You know what I mean? Drugs are not healthy. Those things are not. They're not. But provided you are not, and let me also I'm going to rephrase this. When I say drugs and narcotics, I am not talking about cocaine, heroin, meth. Do you know what I mean? Like these things are not in any way, shape, or form what I am referring to when I say you should do them sporadically. Right? I don't think that's the case at all. I have never met a social heroin user. It's never happened.
I do heroin and crystal meth on the weekends, guys. That's when I go out partying. That's the only time I do it.
I just take a little bump and then I just keep right on going. I've never met that person. So I don't necessarily think that when I think of drugs, I should include alcohol in that, but I am talking about those ones that are legal in your area, not, and I do state in your area because weed is not legal everywhere. Alcohol is not legal everywhere. I do not believe, no, I'm not even going to go there. Fuck that. Irrelevant. Not bad tangent, but just
Irrelevant.
whatever. Irrelevant. When I say things like drugs, I'm really just referring to alcohol, weed, things that aren't going to like entirely upend and ruin your life the first fucking time you do it. If I go smoke crack, chances are, even just the once, there's a pretty good chance that my life just got ruined. I watched people, I was learning how to tattoo in a meth den when I was in my early 20s. And I didn't know it was a meth den. I mean, I knew some of the people like smoked meth, you know what I mean? Knew a couple of them did, but I didn't know that that's what they were selling and doing out of the basement. Had no fucking idea until one day I was just there to learn how to tattoo. Maybe that was naive of me and maybe that was ridiculous. Whatever. I'll take it what it was. But like, motherfucker came up and spent another 3 hours in one spot on this tattoo, and I was like, holy shit. And he was talking my ear off. I was like, this motherfucker's high on meth. Son of a bitch. Needless to say, I didn't go back after that. These people were like relatively functioning before they moved into that house, and within a month, dude, a month of picking up meth, their whole lives had been derailed. And to some of the darkest and ugliest places that I've ever seen. I'm not even willing to risk that. That's not me. I don't give a fuck how good it makes me feel. I know we just really got off tangent on that one and whatever. But again, just to hammer home that idea of a little bit of unhealthiness every once in a while is not going. Maybe it will kill you. Statistically, most likely, you're probably an anomaly if it does. Do you know what I mean? Oops, I had one drink and I dropped dead the next day.
That's highly unlikely, but you might be
right.
So who knows? But that's a different story. That doesn't even need to be pondered on.
Right. I think that the main takeaway from all of that is just if it works for you, and it's not making you feel like death, and it's not impacting your daily life, then it's okay for now. Right? It may change. It may change. That one glass of wine fucking once, twice a week may not be okay in a couple of weeks. It may be okay. And I think that's, without getting too much into where we're heading, those are kind of the things that we're going to try and unpack and look at here. Not everything is super duper straightforward. One of the biggest things I think that I disagreed with when it came to pretty much everyone, Freud, Jung, all those people, is that there's one means of being for people's personality types. And I'm in terms of certain aspects of people's lives, I think that is 100% valid. I don't think there's 8 million different ways that people handle stress in their life. You can probably group that into categories and that makes sense. But when it comes to what brings me joy and what me happiness, it's very difficult to sit there and say, okay, well, you're going to fit into this group.
Yeah.
Because there's too many fucking options out there. Do you know what I mean? I don't even want to get into it because I think we'd spend another 10, 15 minutes going down that road. And not that that's the worst thing in the world, but I think we got to save.
Save some for down the road.
I want to kind of look at what our key takeaways of today are, because we definitely went on some wild tangents. The drug one definitely being the most insane. I can't even believe that. I was like, shit, we got to come back. This is bad. Like, we started talking about meth and fucking heroin, and like, I didn't even plan on getting there, you know? That's a lot for a first episode. You know what I mean? Like, that's a lot.
Well, that's what you're gonna get with. You never know what you're gonna get with us. We're a little kooky, but we'll give you enough stuff that you'll have something to chew on and ponder with.
Yeah, no, definitely. Now you know what kind of cards I'm playing with. And so really, this kind of key takeaway is like health and wellness are two very, very different things. Health is really those biological processes that make me feel okay physically or not okay physically. Maybe that I don't necessarily recognize as feeling. Like, I don't necessarily always feel inflammation. right? But that doesn't mean that it's not there and doesn't exist. But it's those biological processes that make things run smoothly. And wellness is really this idea of what is okay for me. And what is it okay that I can do? What is it that I need to do, right? Really all things kind of concerning the mind and what it needs out of life, spiritually, emotionally, socially, all of those kinds of processes. We talked a little bit, I mean, you know, we touched about modern American lifestyle due to the rise of modern day society. Modern day society is different than the past 10,000 years, you know, and a lot of these ideas being very, very new. And that's okay. That's why we're here. That's why we're going to sit here and try and go down these roads. And then what was the last thing that we discussed that I thought was really, really important?
We discussed the idea of a little bit of moderate. Doing something once is not going to derail your whole.
Yeah. We talked, well, I think really it was more about this idea of personalization was where we were trying to come up at. It's going to be different for everybody, and that's okay. We'll get there. Do you know what I mean?
Stay tuned to be further emphasized in future episodes.
That's all we have for today. Thanks for hanging out with us on Roaming Minds.
Carlos here with a friendly reminder, your mind's worth it.
If you enjoyed our conversation and want to learn more, hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening. Spotify, Apple, whatever works for you. Maybe even drop us a review if you're feeling extra kind. If you're the social media type, come find us on Instagram at roaming_minds_pod. We've got updates, behind the scenes bonuses, all that good stuff.
Catch us next week for another ADHD-filled adventure, chasing life, liberty, and whatever shiny idea grabs us next.